Okay, I was just checking that you have the handouts. It will be helpful. So, you've got something a little bit like this in your pack. You might want to dig that out. That's good. And if you flap them around, we'll all get a little bit cooler because it's a bit warm in here, isn't it? It's nice. It's like a little flock of birds. And I didn't put everything on those handouts, but I also don't want to read everything off my slides, so from time to time I'll ask you to do something. And when I do that, it would be super if you kind of shuffle along a little bit and speak to a colleague somewhere so that we get some people working together. Okay, so a little bit of interaction, a little bit of networking. We have a coffee break in a minute. I'll give you a little rundown of what we're going to do. When we have a coffee break at 6 o'clock, then you can do even more speaking to each other. So I've prepared some homework for the coffee break. So I hope you're ready to be a little bit busy. So as well as that piece of paper, if you haven't already got one out, you're going to need a pen. Okay, so that'll help. So just in case you didn't have me introduced enough times already, I think I had at least 2 introductions there, maybe 3. My name's David Bish. I'm just reading what I do. Okay. I'm the Director of Academic Management for EF Education First, and I particularly work with our Asia Pacific schools. So I don't just work with English, I actually work with Japanese and Chinese school as well. But a lot of the other part of my work is developing our materials and working with the research that we do. And from both the research side and the time in schools, I do a lot of ensuring that teachers are informed about recent trends in methodology. And as we design textbooks and as we teach in our schools, we take the feedback from our teachers on board. So it's a very two-way process that we have at EF with our schools around the world. And we have over 40 permanent full-time schools and a lot more schools that we open seasonally for students traveling for shorter courses. So I better dive in. And it's, as well as me here at the front, it's really good to see so many. I keep counting, and it seems like there's more than something like just over 200 people in this room. So I'm very pleased to see sort of so many colleagues, or so many significant others, as my friend Lev would say, in the room. And that's quite good, because I'm going to be talking in a minute about good teachers. But before good teachers, let's just see what we're going to do. We'll start off with the good teachers at the top there. Then I'm going to talk about something called demand high. And it's going to be the theme, or to use kind of internet speak these days, the meme that we're going to talk about. Then I'm going to, after having introduced it, talk a little bit about learner strategies, yes, but to get learners to work in a slightly different way, we need to potentially change some teacher strategies. So I'm going to get you, I hope, to reflect on teaching strategies that you already use, and maybe analyze and select a few that I'm going to suggest that fit with this demand high meme. And again, this idea of being kind of reflexive practitioners should follow throughout this. I'm going to touch on exam teaching, but from listening to our 2 colleagues here, I think for many of you, your focus is on the internal exams that you do at the 9th and the 11th year, rather than kind of external international exams. So I think I won't stray too much into that field, because I think it's going to broaden the realm of what we're doing, and you have a strong internal focus. So I'm going to touch on some exam strategies, but I won't talk too much about Cambridge exams and so on, because I want to stay focused on your inward-looking focus here. Then we'll have a networking break, bit of homework, talk to each other lots. That's going to be the first, nearly an hour. Then we come back, a bit less to do. Some more reflection, and I'm going to give you some practical strategies, and then I'll talk a little bit right at the end about some of the research we do, and how, if you like, you can be involved in research. And I'm going to try and show you a couple of research tools If the internet connection's good at the end, I'm going to show you some live stuff from a corpus database that we use. And I will also just refresh your memories on some of the things we did at the beginning, particularly with errors. And I'll get really controversial at the end. Okay, so the first hour I'll be nice to you, and the second hour you can disagree with me a bit more. We'll see how that goes. So as I said, I've got quite a lot of significant others in the room, and I thought I'd start with a little challenge. Okay, this is a good challenge because I have some prizes behind me here. Everybody, it seems, everybody from, I don't know, everybody from Barack Obama, maybe, to Bill Gates, everybody has their own favourite teacher. And when I was training to be a teacher in the UK, a long time ago, they used to say, nobody forgets a good teacher. It was one of the adverbs to encourage you to be a good teacher, the kind of fame and fortune. You know, one day you'll be standing on a stage in Russia in front of 200 people, they say, nobody will forget you. These are two very famous teachers. At least I think they're very famous teachers. They are teachers of two very famous people, in fact. And you can just turn to the person next to you, and let's see if anybody out there can recognize, firstly, who they are, and then secondly, maybe who their famous student or pupil was. Okay, they're both from quite different countries, and I'll give you a clue. The one on the right, the one on this side is quite an old picture. So to give you a moment to confer, you can just turn to the person. Any ideas? Who are they? Does anybody think they know? Anybody out there? Anybody got that number? I've got special EF wallets. They're full of money. That's the first laugh I've had. Anybody know? I'll give you a little help. Did you say you think you know over there? Countries. Okay. Oh, that's a good start. That's a good start. Which country do you think? Actually, the gentleman, I believe his family originally from India. Are you going by the ethnography there, the pictures? I tell you what, I'll give you a prize for being the first person to speak, anyway. Were you going to say some more?
And maybe as an Indian teacher, student is a chess player like this.
A chess player? No. Maybe a little bit famous than a chess player. I'll give you a clue. This guy, he became very famous for working on the internet, in fact. He made a video on the internet for, I think she was 7 at the time, his cousin. She wanted to improve her maths, and he was a hedge fund manager at the time. Somebody thinks they know? And then he made one video and she watched it and she improved her maths. And he made another video and another video and another video. And he attracted the attention of some very famous people. And this is what he has, well, I hope it's what he has. Excuse me. The slideshow is not behaving. It was going so well just now. It's all gone horribly wrong now. Excuse me a second. There we go. This. Yes? Are you going to help me with the computer, or you just worked out who this guy is?
I was trying to remember his name, Khan Academy.
Okay, and can you tell us a little bit more about Khan Academy?
So you can just watch the video on different... Okay, if I'm not mistaken, he specializes on technical knowledge, and he's got different videos about mathematics and...
All different subjects. And who gave him lots and lots of money?
I don't know.
Bill Gates.
Oh, they're at the back there. Right, we got over the break. Thank you very much. Well done for chipping in, and keep chipping in. I've got more stuff to give away, don't worry. So Bill Gates gave him actually $1 million, and his company now has $1,600,000. So it's not doing great, but it's a free, not-for-profit company. And in fact, this company had its 1,000,000th student last week. And I was interested to hear in your presentation, Olga, that you were talking about Portuguese a little tiny bit, and we had a little bit on Portuguese there on your little language connections. The 1,000,000th student is actually studying Portuguese on the Khan Academy. And Khan, although he makes something on the internet, he's talking about what's called now the flipped classroom. Have you heard of that? Yeah, so this is the idea where maybe the students watch the presentation outside class. So they see what I used to call, when I was a young teacher, chalk and talk. You know, this kind of lecturing element of the lesson. So the students see that in their own time, outside of the classroom. And then in the classroom, the teacher can focus on the nitty-gritty with the student. The teacher can focus on the students in an English language classroom, speaking, being corrected, working together, and working on what you were calling earlier the community of competence that they have there. Okay? So they get the input outside the class, and then they focus on the actual language use and usage inside the classroom, if we're talking about English. Actually, his name is Salman Khan. He says that he sees his mission to humanize teaching, which is amazing because he runs an internet company. But he feels his job is to get a lot of the information out there so that you people in the classroom can do a closer, more human job with the students, because they've got some information. And of course our students are very plugged in these days. Our students are able to get a lot of extra information from these free internet sources. And as you know, we offer information through our own internet source, through English Town and so on. So students are getting a lot of input that they want to practice and use in the class. That's your class, so you get to work with them. Okay, I don't know if you can remember, I think I showed you somebody on the right. I've talked so long, you've probably forgotten her. Which country did you think she'd come from? That's a good guess. So take a wild, crazy guess who her famous student was. There we go. And that's a real picture. That's excuse my Russian accent. That's Mina Yuditskaya, and she is from Ukraine, I think, and she was his German teacher, in fact, not his English teacher. I'm sorry, he didn't. He was great at German. I think he's well known for that. They met each other not too long ago. And he said about her that he liked her as a teacher. Do you know why he liked her as a teacher? Do you know what quality that he liked about her? She said, somebody in the middle there?
If I'm not mistaken, he said that she was the best one because he could improve his knowledge and become better than she was.
He said better than she was? Oh, okay, that sounds very good.
He had more knowledge of German than she.
Okay.
He was his student.
Okay, so he felt better than he excelled his teacher. Interesting. What I read is when they met, she said, "I hoped he would say I was beautiful," and he said she was serious. And she said he was a serious student, and something connected with what you've said there. And I will give you something when I get up there, I promise. She said that he was a serious student who generally worked very hard. She said maybe he wasn't the best student. She said, but he didn't fail. He kept working until he excelled and he passed. She also said that he used to miss his German lessons to go play judo from time to time. So I'm not sure he was the perfect student. So there are a couple of perfect teachers, and perfect teachers have some very good qualities, and maybe sometimes there are qualities in teachers that people who teach and train teachers, like me, and I'm involved in the TKT program you heard about. I'm involved in working with hundreds of EF teachers to raise our own standards in our own schools. And these are a couple of gentlemen who do something like I do, and I've stolen their ideas for this presentation. I'm sorry, it's none of my ideas. Maybe you know the names? Yeah, a couple of people recognize them. Yeah, A to Z methodology, and also, I'll give you a prize, I didn't even ask, no. And Underhill, there's something in many of your classrooms that Underhill produced as well. Do you know what that is? Underhill actually wrote the layout. He has a copyright on the layout for the pronunciation chart that many of us use with the IPA alphabet, you know, with the vowels in the vowel box. So he kind of took the French IPA idea and arranged it quite nicely. It's used in a lot of language teaching classrooms. And Jim Scrivener, he wrote Learning Teaching, which is a fairly seminal text in EFL methodology. Probably if you do a TKT course or you go and do some methodology course, you will come across this. And I put links at the back of the handout you have, and we will send you the link to the handout at the end of the session. You can click through and you can see some of the things they did, because these two guys, they observed a lot of teachers' lessons. And as they sat at the back of modern communicative class lessons, they observed that there was a lot going on. There was a lot of meaningful activity, of students exchanging ideas, students discussing, conversing, students working towards task completion. And the teacher was setting up tasks and things were going on, and they were working through, they were progressing through their books and materials, they were kind of consuming the syllabus, or we can say the content was being delivered to the students, and they were working through it fine. And it all looked very lovely and nice and neat. But kind of what they thought is, well, where's the actual upgrade in language? And this is Jim Scrivener's phrase. He thought, well, is there really learning taking place all the time? Is there really a push? Is there really a nudge? Because so many of the students in those classrooms were so comfortable. They were moving through things, but they weren't necessarily being individually taught. So they weren't necessarily being given something that they needed as an individual to make that next little individual step in their progress. Okay? And this is the upgrade at a very individual level. And so this is where they then wrote a blog about their ideas, and they developed some strategies, which I'm going to share some of with you as we go through the next sort of hour and a half approximately. And they started this discussion on a blog, which I've given you a link to and you can see, and produced this whole range of materials. But they wanted to make it very clear that this could still work with materials like Rainbow English, for example, or like different approaches that people use around the world. And it's more a thought process, more of an angle about how you use the materials. So this is what they came up with. They called it a meme. This is their meme. It's okay to teach. That's my picture. That's not their picture. Have you seen this one on the internet before? This is Success Kid, apparently. And you can make Success Kids say different things if you go on the internet. It's okay to teach, so demand high. Yeah, awesome. Okay, because you can teach for success, which is the point of my talk today. Okay, so that's kind of good news for you because you're teachers. Right? So if it's okay to do something in the classroom called teaching, that's quite a good thing. And a kind of slight trend in methodology at the moment, you'll see if you attend other conferences around the world, as well as what I'm saying right now, is we've been learner-centered. Everybody's very excited about being learner-centered for quite a long time. And of course, the learning is at the heart of everything we do, and we need to meet the needs of that individual learner and equip them, enable them to learn, definitely. But a lot of people have been forgetting about the teacher and what the teacher does. And the teacher is an essential component in the learning system. Right? Sorry, I make you sound very mechanical there, but you know, it's really important that we as human flesh and blood teachers are involved in there. And that's about humanizing teaching, but it's not about learning, it's about teaching. So Demand High is about teacher strategies, about things that we as teachers can do, potentially to raise the student standards a little bit. And this is no different from what I mentioned that Salman Khan was saying. where he's providing materials for outside the class, so inside the class we can have a very human interaction, close and personal, with our students. And we can meet their individual needs, but it's about you as teachers and what you do. I'm going to skip a slide because this is not a new idea. What it might require a little bit of assistance at the moment because this is quite technically tough. I'm going to show you. This is my friend Lev again. Maybe do you recognise the picture? Oh, you can't even see the picture. This slideshow doesn't like jumping. 1 minute. To come back again. It's going to kill it. Okay, and let's go back here. For some reason, let's try something before. Give me a second. One second, everybody, excuse me. Okay, here we go. So I think I have two PowerPoints up at the same time. Sorry about that. Do you recognize the picture? It's Soviet psychologist more than a linguist, I suppose. Lev Vygotsky. I won't try and say Semyonovich because I'll pronounce it incorrectly. Lev Vygotsky, he was very interested in development, particularly of children. And a lot of his ideas are kind of repopularized now, very much to the fore of thinking. And this is one of his key ideas, the zone of proximal development. And actually, could you come and give me a hand again? I think as you were so good before. And so I'm going to attempt to explain this and the role of the significant other. Although I rather expect, as this guy was kind of, you know, he was educated here. He actually died in Moscow. He wasn't at MGPU. He was at МГПУ, I believe. But let's go down the stairs a second. So we're down here. We're in the comfortable area. And this is what Scrivener and Underhill saw a lot of classes. So if I'm your teacher, okay, and you're my student, all right, are you okay? Sure.
Absolutely.
So is this? Can you do this?
What?
This task we're doing now. This
okay.
Yeah. So it's quite easy. And so if we're down here, it's quite easy, and you're not challenged too much. Right, and we're down here, and potentially this task is low demand down at the bottom there, and low challenge, and you might even get bored if we stay down here for too long. But these guys, they saw a lot of classes that were operating down here. It's all very easy for everybody. But in fact, I'd like to stay there a second. What we really might have is students working up here, but of course up here is like a little bit scary. This is the, if you like, the top triangle there, where it's a little bit scary. We might be a bit anxious to perform up here on their own. You know, my voice might go a little bit high as I'm trying to speak without a microphone. So maybe the learner can't do that on their own, but I can come up here. Let's try this. So we do a little English.
Still easy.
You're okay with this, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I am.
Perfect. Can we try a little bit harder? Yeah?
Feels okay.
Feels okay. A little bit more? You can?
Okay.
So I'm helping, right? Now as a teacher, or I believe the literature says the significant other, I provide scaffolding, support, advice, correction, and so on. And we can bring you up to this level so far, okay? You're still good with this?
I'm still fine.
Would you like to go up a bit more?
No. No.
Just up to the top?
No, I cannot.
Oh, why not?
Too difficult.
Okay. Well, don't worry, we'll stay. So we reached the top of this zone in which my student can extend. And then even with my support, that bit's too scary, that bit's too high. So these steps in this auditorium, they are your zone of proximal development. And that's what we can, Underhill and Scrivener describe it as pushing the student. I prefer it to talk about it as pulling the student. I think the teacher's kind of taking the student. Okay, thank you very much for that. So, thanks a lot. So I think this older idea of zone of proximal development is exactly what Underhill and Scrivener are talking about. Other people talk about it too. A lady called Meryl Swain, who talks about something called push output. I don't know if you've read that theory at all. To me, it's a very similar idea. Even many of you have heard, of course, of I+1. Again, it's a similar idea. But they're looking for these individual upgrades. They're looking for the ways that you can push a learner up. Okay, so that's fair enough. Let's talk about some of their strategies, if this thing will behave. Good. Okay. So, do you want me to read that, or can you read that fine? You can probably see that, right? Just nod sweetly at the back. Can you read that off the board? No, somebody says. Okay, thank you. So I'll read it out loud. A student gives an accurate answer. So I've asked a question, and the student gives a grammatically accurate answer. But instead of me saying, good, I'm going to not just move on, good. I'm going to say, well, could you say that a little bit faster to make it sound a bit more fluent? So I'm not just going to accept an okay grammatically correct answer. I'm going to put something back to the student. Right? What do you think? Just put your hand up, as we did earlier. Put your hand up if you think that sounds like a good strategy. Would you use that at all? Or would you just accept the accurate answer straight away? Yeah, if you're thinking, it's a classic, forgive me, classic Russian teacher answer, it depends, okay? So, if there's ever any yes in your mind, that you might do this, and of course, yeah, absolutely it depends, I totally agree. If there's ever any yes, would you use this strategy? Put your hand up. That's some people, okay, maybe about 13%. How about this next one? I'll read it out again. The teacher doesn't just collect answers from the first one or two people that answer. They put the question to a range of different students around the class, and they adjust the difficulty depending on what they know of the student. Okay, we're talking about very human interaction, this kind of closeness with your class, so it's worked well in your group. But instead of just kind of going, yeah, okay, we got it, good, let's move on, the teacher's asking a few more people to get a few more people involved. Would you use that strategy? Hands up. Good, I expected this. We've got a few more hands on that one. Okay, and then here we go. The teacher gets students to listen and comment on each other's answers. Right? So rather than me as a teacher kind of saying, okay, brilliant answer, that's great. I try and get your classmates to listen to what you're saying, and I get them to comment on the answers that I'm getting. And then I only pitch in with a final correction if and when it needs that. Or if it's become very clear from what the students are saying, the teacher holds back and lets the students interact to produce and confirm the answer. Is that something you'd use? Put your hand up if you'd use it. Okay, yes, I mean, it's about the same number as last time. I think we're probably on about 40–45%. And there's just one more here. This is my disease. Okay, I have this disease. When students say something, I like to say, excellent, brilliant, fantastic, lovely, keep going, marvellous. But Underhill and Scrivener, they suggest something else. They say, don't just leap in with excellent or very good the first time a learner tries to say something. Instead, give them precise feedback indicating how they might upgrade their some aspect of what they've said to make a clear, tangible improvement. Right, so I don't accept something that's okay, but sort of right. I am looking for a way in which I can correct and draw up that individual student. Okay, so at any point in class. Now this is, well, I won't comment because I'll come back to it. What do you think? Was this a strategy you would use? Co, hands up if you'd use it. Yeah, we got less. So honestly, just because you can't see what everybody's doing, we found that the top one got about 30% of people, the middle two about 45%, and the last one about 10%. Okay, I'm just guessing. So, is there a connection with these strategies? Just turn to the one or two people next to you and see, can you see any connection with those ideas? What's the connection? And then I'll ask a few people to shout out some thoughts, okay? So just take 1 minute, turn to the people next to you. What's the central themes in this that we're seeing? Okay, try that out. You've got to talk to each other. I won't ask any questions, you've got 2 minutes. Can you see any connection with what I talked about? Maybe it's really obvious. What I'd like to demonstrate is by getting a few answers out. And it will also keep you awake. We've got 25 minutes to go to coffee, so hang in there if you're at the back of the room, alright? Hello. Okay, do we have a few ideas? So, so the ladies down here, they were so keen to actually say something already. So I'm going to start with them.
It's, the idea is a constant improving for further steps. Upgrade steps, just to improve, and constant improving.
I'm really tempted to say excellent, but of course I'm not going to.
I think to encourage them and to make them feel comfortable, to motivate.
Okay, encouragement, motivation, but also some comfort. That's interesting because not a lot of people see comfort in this. Were there some hands up at the back? Anyone want to add anything? Or right at the back? You're going to keep you fit.
It's not just about encouraging, and it's about involving everyone in the process. It's very important because not only the brilliant ones, but maybe also the others who are almost always silent should participate in the process.
That's a key point, and I'm actually very privileged because I've seen my colleagues' class here at work, so I think that's very true. We're getting other voices in the room involved, not just... We used to call it, again, when I was a young teacher, we called the problem flying with the fastest. You know, when one super keynote puts their hand up and they give you the answer, and it's so tempting just to take that person's kind of, you know, their point of view and move on. But where are the rest of the class? So that's definitely one thing in there. Does anybody else want to add anything? Any other ideas? So what's the central thread? What links all of these? It should be a really easy answer because it's supposed to be the title of the talk. So these are all supposed to be central strategies. You can find these on Scrivener Underhill's website, on their blog. These are all sort of large strategies for demanding high. And something I think you notice in there, what part of the lesson do these live in? Are they in the presentation? Where and when are they? They're in practice, yeah, they're in practice, and maybe when the teacher's correcting, okay? And something sort of I'm trying to demonstrate, it's very difficult in this auditorium because it's not like a regular class that we're all used to working in, but something that, again, I think all the great quotes come from Jim Scrivener, sorry, rather than Adrian Underhill, but he talks about working one amongst many, and he talks about getting the students to do, as my colleague up there was saying, the practice activities, or more typically these days, in some form of task, or it's maybe quite an open task, and the students are working through, and the teacher is facilitating the work in the task, but also the teacher is very proactively monitoring and being involved in some kind of correction. In these strategies, is the teacher correcting by giving the answer? Yes or no? No, that's a nice simple concept check, right? I can definitely tell you you're correct there. No, the answer is coming from the students in the group. Okay, so now I'm going to let's treat this as a bit of a case study. I need to get the mouse back on that screen. So a little bit of a case study here is this. Yeah? We're going to talk about good exam teachers. I have a lot on Cambridge exams here, but I'm going to skip it. Oops, too fast. Think of a country where they don't teach exams very well.
Greece.
Oh, yes. Okay. So, in Greece, the context is teaching Cambridge exams. I don't know if you know, but for a Cambridge first certificate exams, Greece is actually the largest market worldwide. Okay. Is anybody Greek here? Okay. Greek education is a bit of a mess. Okay. It's kind of like their economy. And they actually use the Cambridge First Certificate exams as a demonstration of how successful a student is in more or less all their subjects, because it's an external yardstick. So whereas here it's very important and very valued, you're talking about these year 9 and year 11 sort of internal measures, in Greece they use an external measure for this. And so first certificate is very important. But unfortunately, that doesn't mean that Greek kids are good at first certificate, right? In fact, they're abysmal, and some of their results, if you compare their age and so on, they tend to put the kids in for the exam quite early, which doesn't help. One Greek expert, he did a survey in, I think it was English Language Teaching Journal. He did this in 2002. And he asked teachers what they felt were things that they did wrong in their teaching. So these are things that the Greek teachers are admitting. And I want to know if you, and again, I want you to turn to people next to you. Let's have a little bit of a discussion. And imagine, okay, this is talking about Cambridge exams, but turn your thoughts inwards. Imagine you're thinking about your sort of state exams, or whatever they call these year 9, year 11 exams that your kids have got to pass to get on to high school and so on. So here are some things that these Greek teachers are doing that they recognised was actually harming their teaching. Like harming the it's okay to teach. The exam obsession syndrome. Do you recognise that one? Yeah, exam obsession. So this kind of means that, that like every exercise I do is a bit like the exam. Every time I open my mouth, I'm talking about the exam. Everything we do is focused on the exam. So we teach to the test. So this fits a little bit like that last one, actually, that number 5. So as well as an obsession with the exam, in number 5, and we're constantly telling the students about the exam, but in number 5, every activity we do is an exam-style activity. So any time we do a speaking, we use an exam speaking. Or every time we do a writing, we do an exam writing. Okay? So it's very, what I might call funnel, it's very narrow. And that, what Gabrielatos said is that seemed to be examining the students rather than teaching them. Okay, so there's an examination. Then the vocabulary list syndrome. I think that one's clear. Giving out lots of vocabulary lists. I'll give you a moment to reflect in a second. Excuse me, if you're a very religious person, these aren't my words. These are Gabrielatos' words. The course book as a Bible. And some of us here are course book writers. I know We like our course books to be taken very seriously, but personally, as a course book writer, I see three things in a class. I see student, course book, and teacher as a kind of triangle. And this kind of describes a learning space. And I believe the lesson takes place somewhere in that space. Now, sometimes it's a little bit more towards the course book, or towards the teacher, or towards the student. But that needs to be flexible. And if it's always focused on the course book, especially if it's an exam skills course book, that is very asymmetric way of dealing with it. So we don't meet individual students. And again, as a course book writer, I wrote course books 2 years ago that are being used in schools now. And I never met those students. I've never been to the countries that they learn. You know, and there are course books that are written out there that have been written years ago. So there's no real flesh and blood connection to the students. That's you, the teacher. And every student's different. So you can never just 100% use the course book as read. Then compartmentalization. This is the idea of, if you're teaching skills, and today we're going to do reading. So today is just all about reading. Tomorrow we're going to do writing. So don't read anything tomorrow, just write stuff. You're not allowed to read at the same time, that's cheating. Okay? And today we'll do speaking, but you can't listen when you're speaking. Okay? Because we're doing listening tomorrow. So if you break your skills down, okay, maybe you'll say, okay, today we're going to do pronunciation. But don't pronounce when you speak, please, because we've got speaking tomorrow. Okay? And don't listen to their pronunciation, please, because listening was yesterday. Right? That's clearly a little bit synthetic, but it happens. Right? So by focusing on individual skills rather than integrated skills work. And that is something that you can get caught up with if you're exam teaching. Because, you know, like paper 1, for example, might be about reading. So you do lots of reading strategies and so on. So these are Greek problems, they're real problems. Can you just be honest? I'm not going to test you, I'm not going to ask for any answers at the moment, and we've got about 15 minutes before break, so you're still a bit awake. Just turn to the 2 or 3 people next to you and tell me if you feel, or tell each other, if you feel you suffer from any of those problems. Maybe not because of yourself, but because of possibly external pressures. Maybe make you do this in your class, okay? So it's not necessarily your fault, but do you suffer from any of those syndromes? Have a chat. Give me 2 or 3 minutes to chat together. Great to hear you talking. I'll give you about 30 seconds more, and then we'll move on to something else that reflects the same thing. If anybody does want to ask me an awkward question, I'm here. Chat to your colleague behind you. Pick their brains. I did say in this first part I was going to try and get you to reflect a little bit, so I'm not going to force anybody to answer at this point. Let's do some more of this reflection. That's probably about as much as I'm going to cover on exams, but I'll sneak back into it in a second. here's a task that you can do. It's a nice closed task, okay? I'm gonna jump forward in my slides a little bit. So, okay, so here I'll just take them off. So I've got on the board. It's a nice. This is the kind of thing we all like in class. It has definite answers, maybe. There are 10 strategies on the board. I'm going to show you in a second, and those strategies are either teacher or student. And I think most of them are one and some of them are the other. So I would like you to work with a partner, and I want you to work together for these 10 things. And I think, if I'm correct, that I put them on my handout. Yes, I have. So they're on the back of the second page. And I know now you'll start the task, but try and bear with me just a second. I want you to do 2 things, please. First, with your colleague, can you write T or S by each one? And do confirm, please talk together, if you think it's a teacher or a student strategy. And so if you think it's a student, is the I in this sentence a student or a teacher? Yeah, it's also on your handout. Okay, all right, I'll give you mine, but it's all right because you're sharing with the lady next to you. So are they teacher or student? And then I want you to decide, well, are they demand high strategies? We talked about that a couple of slides ago, and maybe you saw a slight connection with the Greek exam syndromes. So each of those strategies, try and decide whether you think they're demand high or not, and whether they're teacher or student. But do talk together. I'm going to give you full 5 minutes to talk, and I'll roam around a lot. And as I roam around a lot, you can ask me questions. And I'm going to grab one more handout from my colleague here. Sorry, I'll get my seat now. If anybody else would like an extra handout, I have some you can give to colleagues. I was saying, if you write T and S and you're the kind of person that doesn't like spoiling a nice clean handout, I have some extras as well, so you can, don't worry if you cross things out, okay? And again, we will email you this afterwards, so you can still have a nice tidy copy to share with any colleagues if you want to do this again. So feel free to write all over and make as many mistakes as you like. give you a minute more. And please do chat with your colleagues, because I want you to talk together. That's far more important than just listening to me. Yeah? Listen to your colleagues in the same context as you. And again, as well as the TNS, do these things fit with the demand high meme? And if they don't, can you change them subtly to make them work with the demand high meme? That would be brilliant if you could do that. Okay, let me stop you there. I can see a few people have finished. I know not everyone's finished, so forgive me if I move on just a little bit for the sake of time. Let's take these. I know they're all on the screen at once, but let's take them one at a time. Perhaps you can see the connection in the first one straight away with those Greek problems. Is that a teacher or a student speaking? Definitely a teacher, isn't it? Is it? Yeah? So, do students ever make their own activities? Yeah? A few people are saying, yeah, students could do something like that. You know, maybe students have a strategy. Maybe they say, okay, I have to read something in a certain amount of time for this exam, so I must make myself read that. Well, they put it possibly. But it's really my thinking. It was a teacher. Do you think that's a demand high strategy? Not really, not necessarily at all. Now, how about the second one? I practice the writings of typical type, so I have my mistakes checked and I memorize them. That's probably a student, yeah? Do you think it's demand high? Do you think it's demanding? Is that hard work? It's definitely, I mean, I'm agreeing with this group. That's like a tough strategy, right? Did any of you do this? Back in, when you were studying English for the first time? Yeah, I'm sure it's a strategy. I can see some nods out there that people are being quiet because they feel it might be the wrong answer, but definitely it's a strategy that many people use when they're learning languages. Yeah, this memorization. Again, corrections, and we look at corrections and mistakes, so corrections and mistakes are in there. So it's definitely a strategy, but in terms of what I'm talking about, this demand high meme, it isn't a demand high strategy. I'm not saying it's not demanding, I'm not saying it's a bad strategy, but it doesn't fit with what Andrea and Scriven were talking about. That doesn't mean they disagree with it, it's just not this upgrade that they're trying to find. Okay, how about number 3? I want to be corrected every time I make a mistake. A student. Yeah. Is that demand high? What do you think? No, I've got lots of no's this time. Why not? Okay, you can try and shout up a little bit.
Because they don't feel sure when they are.
If we flipped it around to teachers, should teachers correct every mistake that every student makes?
No.
Oh no, a resounding no. Okay, and remember, we want to selectively pick on students. Yeah, that's right, pick on sounds very negative, okay? We want to selectively select students and make sure we draw them forwards. But if we focus on every single mistake, one of the potential problems with demand high is getting the students right up here, okay? Right at the top, outside the ZPD. Please, someone in the break teach me how to say zone of proximal development in Russian. That will sound cool. If we're outside the ZPD, the student is too stressed. And I think that can happen too much if you pick on absolutely every error outside the area that they're close to working on. So if we jumped on every single error that the student made, maybe some of those wouldn't be about the small upgrade. They wouldn't be in that proximal zone. So this is where we as teachers need a knowledge of our individual students. Right? So we need to know what they're good at and bad at. Rather than just jump on everything. And of course, jump on everything is not the world's greatest motivator. Okay, it's almost the opposite, isn't it? Number 4, is that teacher or student?
Teacher.
And think back to the demand high strategies that I gave you, these 4 big ones. Does that fit?
Yes, it's number 1.
So 4, I give positive praise and feedback. We have some disagreement, that's good, because I shouldn't take the first answer. I should get some more answers. Did you say no? Sorry?
No, I didn't say no, but I think that, well, for example, mathematical it is impossible to do because there are so many poor students, that are not good at our school program. So I cannot give them only, positive feedback, because sometimes I make them learn something and, well, that actually is not always positive. So I think that you understand, I hope that you understand what I mean.
I think it was very brave of you. So you've got a huge group, they're not all brilliant performers, right? They're not all great. Now, we need to be positive in our attitude towards people, and I can just see by your face that you're not going to be hitting them and telling them they're stupid or anything like that. But sometimes just this kind of over-praise for the sake of praise and reassuring students that everything's lovely and they're doing fine can be a mixed message. Especially if you are committed to teaching in the L2, right? If you're committed to immersion in English, remember sometimes a student is going to struggle with the nuances in what you're saying. So they just hear, yes, teacher thinks I'm correct, rather than teacher is encouraging me. So there's a potential danger there. So as well as a positivity in what we do, we need to provide and I think they said there, precise feedback on what is wrong and how it can be improved. So just aspect of praising, if that's how you read that, isn't good enough. But positivity is important. So I think that's a fairly open point. Number 6, again, memorize some good phrases for the speaking exam. Yeah, maybe the teacher memorize some good phrases to teach them to the student. Is that demand high?
No.
Yes, I know. Actually, it's not demand high. I'll jump straight in this time. I mean, it's similar to the other one. It might be demanding, but again, if the student's just memorizing the phrases, they're not maybe analyzing the English. And there's a lot here about, we'll come and talk about it after the break, a lot about the correction, but this kind of peer correction and self-correction. This reactivation of the kind of monitor, if you like, in this kind of language acquisition, and looking back at what you can do and trying to upgrade. Remember we said, where is the upgrade? If you just think you've memorized some phrases and you just try and use them on pat, you're not really learning and improving. And demand high is about keeping the push up. We're not just comfortable and safe, we're pushing. So that doesn't get the push. I'm going to fall over the steps now. Okay, I'm prepared to, excuse me, I do all the activities in the course book, following a set procedure. Student or teacher? I'm glad somebody said student. Why did you say student?
Both.
Do I suffer from times when I'm in class of students who you give them the course book on the first day of term, and you come on the second day of term and they filled it in and they've done every exercise. And then every lesson they go, yeah, I did this one at home. And I go, but I want you to speak to your partner. No, I did it. On short summer courses, that can be tricky to deal with, I tell you. So students do this sometimes. But they don't, if they do that, they don't recognize that there's a value of interacting and explaining and trying out your ideas on someone else and getting their feedback. Even if you are 100% correct, there's more you can get from the activity. So following a set procedure, if teachers do that, is that demand high? No, it isn't. I agree. It's not demand high because the teacher needs to have to be a little bit selective. If they're looking for where's the upgrade, there are places in the coursebook, even the best coursebook in the world, that when talking about your students, it doesn't give the upgrade because it's not what they need. So you don't blindly do it. It gives you a chance to hop forwards or skip sideways and avoid that. So demand high wouldn't just kind of blindly follow, as it said on the Gabrielatos slide from 2002, it said not using the coursebook as Bible. Right? So being a little bit more aware. So I'm prepared to explain answers that I know are correct. This is a really important one, so bear with me on this. Number 8. Is that teacher or student? It is both. It's absolutely both. And is it demand high? If it's a student, is it demand high? Somebody's saying no. You said yes? Do you want to add some more? Let's be brave.
Well, I think it's also high demand for a student to explain why he or she thinks the answer is right. Why not?
Which is exactly what you're doing now. Yeah? You're explaining why you're right to some extent, and I think that's quite demanding for you. Let's see what your colleague has to say.
I think that if we have the statement I'm prepared to explain in my answers, it would be high demand. But if to explain the answers I know are correct, it's high demand. It's not high.
So we had a good answer, and we had another great answer, right? So we didn't accept the first answer, even though you were pretty correct, but this is also correct. In fact, demand high is going beyond that, and it's exactly what you said. The student should be prepared to explain their answer, whether they're right or wrong. And this is part of the demand high. We'll see some more strategies where you turn the answer back. Remember I said that one where we got the student, they gave the answer and just said it a bit quicker, or explain the point and so on? We're going to push the student a little bit more. So they should be ready to explain both. I know some of you are going, oh, our colleagues are sneaking off the break. Don't worry, catch you later, 10 seconds, we're nearly there. Once an error is corrected, we move on. It's a teacher, yeah. Is it demand high? Not really, because sometimes we need to dwell on it. We can take that quick first answer, but we need to keep working. Okay, now I'll whiz through the last one. I monitor all tasks to make sure they're completed correctly. That is a teacher. Now monitoring, you can monitor like this. Okay, I give you guys an activity. Get the phone out, maybe do a little bit of texting, make a cup of tea, do some marking. That's one way to monitor, right? Or facilitate, right? It's kind of aggregation of responsibility. Did I say aggregation? Okay, it's you kind of you leave things to one side. You let the students get on with it. Is that demand high teaching? No, because you need to be out there amongst the students. That's why I don't like this, because I'm stuck at the sides. So I'm very lucky now because we have a break. I'm going to give you a homework. Sorry. Aha. You've got two things on your. May I borrow your handout? Just a second. Thank you very much. You've got, just to keep you thinking, on your handout while you're chatting and you're networking, there are some questions that you can ask yourself at the break. And if you've got a pen in a second, you can fit them into this SWOT matrix. It's a little way to think about whether they're challenges or threats or opportunities. Okay, so chat to somebody else and say, do you think what David was saying was rubbish? Have a look yourself. Do any of these things fit? And we'll revisit it after the break, okay? So, I'm sorry, it's 5 past. Should we come back at 20 past? Is that all right? So it's a little bit extra. So 20 past, back in here after your coffees and your smokes and everything. It's good, we can sort of start because just up on there is this thing I gave you in homework for the break. So you can see this SWOT analysis. So I'll talk about that for a moment and then I'll move on with the main points. So really the idea of this SWOT analysis is really sort of for question 6 on here, about small shifts that you can make or potential blocks to shifts that you might make. I wonder what percentage of people will come back. So the SWOT analysis that you have on there, maybe you haven't seen this much before because your language teachers, it's very often used in business teaching on MBA programs and so on. It's a way to identify a pathway towards a business goal, towards a business objective. And you look at where you're able to do very well, both from internal and external factors. So what are the opportunities that are external? What are your internal strengths? And then you look at the things that you can't do so well, which are your weaknesses, if they're internal, things you can't yet do, or threats that pose external problems. And I was talking to Olga just now, and she was saying one of the threats, for example, about using all of this, everything I talked about, is that you have so many students in your class. So if you have so many students in your class, it's tough to give everybody individual attention. Yeah? So I might not notice, for example, if I've got 250, that one of my very good students moved from the back right there down to in the middle right here, and I might not notice that they're motivated and they need some extra attention. Okay? So we also have potential weaknesses. You know, a teacher might find that the course that they use or their own language skills aren't ready for doing this. Demand high teaching, if you follow this network, I'm going to give you some more strategies in a moment. One of the problems with demand high teaching is it's so open. If it doesn't follow a very strict, clear pathway, it can be a bit threatening itself to a teacher. It can be a bit unnerving. Because if you're going to meet every student in an individual way with what difficulties they individually have in an activity, you're not just making one set presentation. So you're meeting individual needs and you're working very much with what many different students need. So you can't predict and pre-plan everything. You pre-plan activities and tasks, but then you try and get amongst the students to do stuff. And that, for many of us as teachers, can be threatening both in terms of what we're going to do in lesson and how we time our plan over the syllabus. And of course, an obvious threat is how long we have, and another obvious threat is what we have to get done in the class because our bosses tell us we have to get it done in the class, like exams. So maybe you use this first page of my handout here to do a little bit of reflection. I'm not going to kind of give you any correction on that. That's something that, again, I'd encourage you to look back at yourself. And as I also said, a lot of these ideas I give you links on so you can explore in more detail. And we will send out a link to the slideshow afterwards so you can have a look back, and a handout so you can use it yourself and with colleagues. And if we're very lucky, maybe someone will even let us have the video so we can post a link to the video so you can watch this again in your own time. But I'm going to move on a couple of slides, I hope. And where's this going to take me? Sorry, back. Okay, this is get your brains working after break. So we're all back here now, it's not quiet. This is a Wordle. Has anyone used these word clouds things? A couple of people? So it's a thing on the internet. There's a couple, I've given a couple of links to these in my set of links. Wordle's the most famous one. What you do is you take any text and you just drop it onto this website and it draws this pretty picture. But you can see some of the words are bigger than others. Does anyone know why they're bigger? Some of the words that are in the text appear bigger? No? They're most frequently used. Yes, so this is a kind of a text concordance, to use a technical name. So rather than giving a frequency as a number, the size and the colour indicates the common words. And what I've actually done is I took Adrian Underhill and Jim Scrivener's blog and I put it into Wordle. Right? So I took all the text they've written. It's a very interesting way you can play with the text. So you can spot the main themes in the text, so maybe the keywords, because these are words they use again and again and again. and see if you, just from what you can see there, and I want you just to turn to 2 or 3 people next to you, can anyone make one sentence from this? And beware, it's this system, it cuts out words like the, at, of, in. Most of those grammatical particles are missing. So you have to add some grammatical particles in, and I also reduced everything to the infinitive in there. So you might want to change with tenses or make plurals and so on, but I tended to put everything in the base form, okay, so just so it would be clearer for you. So see if you can use that as input and make a sentence that's true about demand high by combining some of those thoughts of a block. Okay, so just work together, see if you can do that. I'll give you just 1 minute and then someone can put their hand up and give us an example, okay? So 1 minute together, have a go. Bear in mind, I think the particle not is missing there, so there's no negative. You might want to add one of those in, as well as sort of auxiliaries do have prepositions, make self-sentence. That's about a minute. Has anybody got a sentence they can give us? Was that a hand or are you just scratching your head? I say that to students all the time. I have got a big prize here. This is stuffed with 5,000 ruble notes, you know. Oh, you answered so many questions. Was that a hand? Do you have an answer for us there? Oh, you're going down front, great. So give us a sentence.
The sentence is very simple. Every activity you follow should make any mistake corrected, but I have used the suffix ed after correct. I don't know whether it suits or not.
Yeah, that's you're very welcome to change. Yes.
Yeah, I've done it.
Yeah, no good. Why did you change correct?
Make something corrected because it's a past participle after make. Make any mistake corrected. Yeah, can it be?
Yeah, it's absolutely
okay.
Fine. So if you make everything corrected, who's making the correction?
Anybody. Teachers or students, both of them, of course. In pair group or in front of the class, it can be done in different ways.
Good. Fantastic. Very good. Oh, I do that all the time. I told a lie about the rules, okay, so don't. I hope that was a beautiful sentence, so thank you very much. And you strung so much together there. You also manipulated the language a bit, which is good. Okay, that's what we want students to do, it's not just bolting things together. And again, in my attempt to correct, because I think a lot of this demand high, when you read a lot of the tactics, I'll show you some more of these strategies in a minute, a lot of them are about the correction point. And this is where you work up and close and personal with students, maybe amongst many students, and you as a teacher, I'm sorry, I was putting you on the spot there, and it's very freaky when you've got a microphone, you can't see all these people and their ugly faces when you're speaking, but when you're working amongst a group, what tends to happen, if you use some of these techniques, when you're working with one student, the other eyes sort of turn towards you, even if students are busy. So obviously everyone's looking at me now because I'm in an auditorium with a microphone, but if we were doing a task and the teacher moves around the class, I always used to talk about the sheepdog effect when the teacher moves around the class. You know, you move around the class and you go to the students and all the students go that way, and then you move that way and they'll go that way around the class. But if you go and you correct this guy, all those ones over there, they sort of watch and they listen in. And this is what, this is pretty much what our little Scrivener, particularly Scrivener, was talking about here, where you do this correction, one amongst many, and the others start to notice. So it does have an effect on other students in the class, even though you need to do this personal upgrade for each student. at the point of need, where they have difficulty, you jump in there. And that's the teaching. Right? That's the okay to teach them. Not setting up a task and going up and making a cup of coffee, setting up a task and getting in there as everyone's talking about. So, thank you for that. And that wordle idea, actually I'm going to give you another one, because you liked that, didn't you? Say no. Okay. I'm going to try and find another one, because so I'm going to get high tech. 1 second. Excuse me having to flick through so many things, but the PowerPoint's a little funny. I'm not going to risk going online, because we're a little short of time. I hope you can see this screenshot. It's actually from an EF piece of free software. It's called the EF CamDat. Any guesses what the CAM in CamDat is? Think of a large university. Not GBOU. Okay, yeah, Cambridge. Okay, so we work together with the Department of Applied Linguistics at Cambridge University. And we have a database of student work. And if some of you might have studied with EF, I know some people here have done TKT programs, I know some people have sent students to EF. When you sign up for an EF course, when you do that English Town work online with EF, there's actually a little clause, and maybe you noticed it, I hope you have, because if not, this might upset you. Any work you do online, any free writing you do, we use for research. So we have a database here, and again, it's quite small for you to read it, but there's over 2 million words in this database at the moment. These are 2 million words of samples of students producing English. By the end of this season, we will have entered 10 million words into this. Okay, last year we only had 1 million, and we have the researchers working with us in Cambridge, and what they do is they add the sentences in. And as they add the sentences in, the computer grammatically parses the sentence. So it spots the predicate, and it breaks that down, and the verb, and everything, the subject, and it marks it all grammatically. Although the sentence is often wrong, because these are student work. Okay, so you get a real sample of what students do. And with this tool, what you can do, what I did here, I looked at Russian students, and I only selected Russian students. You can select all the nationalities, okay? And you can have Russia, and you can add other countries in. So you can add Belarus and Russia, for example, or just have Russia. And you can then say what level they are. So I chose on this screenshot, again, it's not too clear to show. I chose B2 students on the Common European Framework of Reference. And I asked the system to look at errors where the students, or any examples where the students had used the word should and the word to after it. Right? And I asked it to come up with some samples. So in this way, I was able to get the computer system to give me some samples of language that students get wrong. And I did this because I don't teach a class. And I wanted some sort of things that students get wrong. And some of the examples that I have on this database, actually, to make it a bit clearer, I've stuck it on your handout. Okay, you got this handout here on the... Can you see that on page... On this page with the yellow... And you see I've marked the errors? Can you see those? Yeah? Okay, now we're gonna play with this in a second. We'll come back to that sheet. First, I'm going to do an example. Okay? This is almost the same. These errors aren't on your sheet. This time, I've chosen lower level students. Okay? This was lower level students, and you can see they were talking about animals and stuff. Can anyone here, you're going to hate this, okay, sorry, you're not going to like this, I think. Can anyone here give me an incorrect sentence using those words on the board? So again, like you just did before, you can play with the particles and so on, but like our colleague here did giving a good sentence, this time work together just a minute, and from these words that I've pulled from the database, and I've thrown into a Moodle, I want you to give me an incorrect sentence, okay? So just take a moment, see if you can give me an incorrect that will highlight one error. And I'll just give everyone else a minute and I'll get you to give us yours, okay? So think.
Are you ready? Yes. Yeah. And you're going to be on the microphone, and I'm going to make this up. Okay. Yeah. And you will.
All right. So hopefully some of you have a question. But the reason I did this, or some of you have an example of an error. The reason I've done this is just to generate one error on this particular form. Okay. Probably if you're teaching in a class, you have no problem getting mistakes or errors from students. Forgive me if you know the technical difference between the terms error and mistake. I won't go into that at this point, okay? So I know the two terms aren't interchangeable exactly. But our colleague here is, sorry, what was your name? Dasha. Okay, Dasha, give me the microphone.
Yes, okay.
Okay, what's your mistake?
If you want to be a good zookeeper, you should to feed animals daily.
Okay. Can you say that same sentence, Dasha, another way?
Okay. In order to be a good zookeeper, you should to feed animals daily.
Okay, that's the same way. Can you change that another way?
Okay. A good zookeeper feeds animals daily.
Nice, excellent. And so that's a fact. Can you give me some advice for that zookeeper?
Advice. Dear zookeeper, please feed your animals daily.
Excellent, excellent. So that's advice for a zookeeper. How about if we made it advice for somebody who feeds children in a school?
Okay. Children should to be fed daily in school.
Okay, right. And so, can we put any word between should and to in that sentence?
Of course.
Yeah.
Children should always to be fed in school.
Okay. Can anybody else give us an example where we put one or two words between to and should? In that sentence to make it, can you give us your sentence again?
I forgot.
Should and should to always
be fed. Children should to always be fed in school.
Can anybody give us a correction of that? Maybe putting some extra words between to and should?
Should regularly be fed.
Okay, let's pass that back to you.
So maybe children should regularly be fed at school.
Okay. Can you say that with always as well?
Yes. Children should always be fed.
Okay. What was the difference between your sentence and Dasha's sentence?
I think it's a slight difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the difference exactly?
Maybe in word order.
Okay. I think the word order was the same. I think there was a word missing. Which word was missing?
Maybe the meaning, the lexical meaning.
Which word was missing in your version?
Right. So.
Can anyone help?
To, yes.
To was missing.
Yes.
Okay.
The part,
Can we make that sentence with should and to and do something else? Dasha wants to go. Come on, you have to go.
Yes. Wait. Children should have to be fed, but it's weird.
Okay. Can anybody else do that in a different way? So children should have to be fed, we have?
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Asked to be fed.
Okay, great. You're really working hard right now, yeah? You're very under pressure, right? So children should have to be fed. Could you tell me what was your original mistake? How did you say it when you said it wrong?
If you want to be a good zookeeper, that one. If you want to be a good zookeeper, you should to feed animals daily.
Okay, can you now put your correction in that?
If you want to be a good zookeeper, you should ask to feed animals daily.
Okay, that maybe works. Maybe there's other ways to correct it, okay, but that's where you got. Now, so I'm cheating here, because I've got a little set of instructions of things to do as I put you through that. Thanks for everybody else who joined in. I give you a little prize there. But what we did there, clearly we started with a mistake, and this is where I kind of expect this is unpopular, because I've done this kind of thing with teachers in Russia before, and we focused on the mistake. Okay, and we did a few things. And I might do this with the list, a few things we didn't do, to focus on the mistake and think around the mistake, get the student to focus back on the mistake, and actually get the student to rework it, think why it's a mistake, think what else they can do, notice the mistake, come back to the mistake and recorrect it. So we did an awful lot of work where we make that mistake very important. So we're recognizing that that mistake is a step in the learning process. But rather than simply move forward and try and forget about it completely, we recognize that that's something that's helped the student learn. And we force the student to think about it a little bit more. Okay, so rather than just correct it and move on quickly, this demand high often focuses back on those mistakes, as you were saying before, right? So they become corrected by someone. So demand high requires a lot of focus on mistakes. Now, I recognize that isn't always a popular thing with teachers. Because some teachers are like, no, it's a mistake, I don't want them to remember it. But the demand high approach actually sort of says, you do want students to remember the mistake. Not just remember the words of the mistake, but remember why they made it and how they corrected it and what the point is. Okay? So I want you to try pretty much what we did there, but I want you to try it in a little group of a couple of you and see if you like any of these ideas. You might just hate it, okay? I don't mind if you hate it. I'm only presenting the ideas. Don't throw tomatoes at me. So I want you to look at this list on the sheet here. And they're all mistakes, okay? There's 12 things here, they are wrong. If 12 mistakes is too much for your head at this time of night, just fold the paper in half and look at 6. Right? If you're really sleepy, fold it right up and just look at 3. I don't mind, it'll still work. What I would like you to do is look through them and use the bullet points at the top. And maybe you can work with a colleague, and one of you can be teacher. If you're lazy, be teacher. Okay? If you're active, be student. And the lazy teacher, ask these questions of your student. Right? So, what's your favourite mistake? In there, it's the first one. Okay? Then the next one, now, can you say it correctly? What was the mistake you started? Maybe get them to hide the paper for that one. And then try a few of the little things here. Is there another way to say it, another way to correct it? Why is that the answer? Then do a little bit of work putting them together and so on. And you can work on any mistake here, and any language is alright. The idea is to, remember, we're giving that little push, that little nudge to the student. Okay? So just have a little role play, teach a student, and use this as your input. Okay? 5 happy, joyous minutes focusing on mistakes. Have a go. Have a go. Even if you hate it, have a go.
to go. Oh, yeah, well, you tried it with me. I suppose that's fair. How has everyone been trying it out a little bit? It's very quiet. That means either no or we don't want to speak to you. We have no energy there. Right. At least you know how the students feel at the end of the day. Pardon? This isn't energizing. No, you're worn out. I'm sorry.
So we didn't catch the task.
So the task is, one of you is using these instructions to your colleague, and then the other one is playing student.
And then we should use we should correct.
No, you don't have to correct. Well, if that's the question. So, if I'm teacher, you're me, we're saying to you, you're the student, okay? What's your favorite mistake?
What's your favorite mistake? You are a student. Must say it correctly. You must.
Okay, let's move along because we're sort of running short of time, which is good to see you all working. I hope some of you actually tried that. Every time I went round, we had this classic where it went sort of quiet in my part of the room. So I hope some people did try it out, and maybe I'll do it with all of you. So we've got these pointers on the board, and there's actually a few more, but I just kept a selected few. Did anybody have a favourite mistake from this list on your handout? Was there anyone you thought was particularly funny? Not funny, but favourite?
Must too.
Yeah? What was the one you liked? Can you read it out sort of loudish?
Another thing, I will too participate, and the real parents will too.
Will too, okay. So this will to participate. So again, then we go on to if a student's recognizing and staying in the class, can you say it correctly? Well, is that one easy to correct? Probably quite easy for you guys because you're English teachers, so you're just going to drop the will out of there. Then can we correct it another way? This is a way to challenge the students because there's an obvious correction, or technically, as language teachers, you might call it an obvious recast. You know, when a student gives you bad English and you try and work out what they meant, you recast it one way, and there's usually very different ways to do it. So we've got the obvious correction is another thing, comma, I'll participate, and maybe I'll rather than will, I'll participate in the careers fairs. We might even drop the there, right? Is there another way to correct that? Keeping the will and the to.
Be able to.
Be able to, good. So you can pop a kind of semi-modal in there.
Have to.
I'm going to, I suppose, yeah. So a different form of kind of future might work better, yeah? Yeah, so we switch that kind of form there. Yeah, why not? You can change what you like. Want to? Okay, so because maybe in the student's head was want instead of will, and again, if we're talking about the different futures, there is an importance there to think about want and will, because will is about sort of desire, really. That's why we use the word will rather than pull in British English. About to, and maybe I will have to, is another one. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you meant. You just meant maybe I have to. Okay? But of course we could say maybe I will have to. Right? So maybe I will need to in any other way. So we can make it passive, we can add in different auxiliaries and so on. And all of those different corrections, if we push those back onto students, are all ways to getting them to think why they might have made that mistake. Okay? So these are all suggestions on how you can make a student, when you're working one-to-one close with them, sort of think about their error, rather than just, what's the correction, move on. So different ways to correct it. So when we've got another way to say it, we would then possibly go back to why is that the answer? And again, I was kind of supplying some of the why, but really push your students. Okay, that's the answer because it's a future tense, or that's the answer because I can't use this modal in this way. This modal verb is never followed by to, for example. Then we ask the student where somebody might say that. Can anyone answer that? I think it's a good question. Where might somebody say number 6? Who might you say? What's the context? Anyone know? If you look carefully, there's kind of 3 contexts, or maybe just 2 contexts in this set of errors. Where are they talking? Any ideas? Yeah? Yeah, I think it is an interview. I think you're right. And they're talking about what things they'll do and their aspirations and so on. And again, that might hint at the fact to the student that contextually, possibly, present perfect is the sort of tense we might use in that situation. So that might come in there rather than that will to. So again, it would suggest something to them as we're working, rather than talking about the present. Or they might be talking about their aims in the job. So they might be talking about what they will be doing, rather than will to. So there's another way forwards for that. Okay, so the context. And then we put them in a conversation, maybe mix it together with another error. Yeah, or another piece of correct English. So we're getting to explore it beyond the bounds of that sentence a little bit. Are there any sentences that fit well with 6? Maybe not as a sentence, but in the same piece of speech. Yeah. So right at the back, we're saying, shout out a number.
It's number 2 and it's number 4. 3.
Yeah. Definitely 2, 4, yes, and 3 as well maybe, yeah, as a person's going on. Okay, so all of those fit together. And then when the students have fitted them together, we get them to consider what errors there are, whether there's any commonality in the errors, whether they're all corrected the same way and so on. But the thing is there, we are getting the students to focus back on the errors. I'm not suggesting you do it in open class to every student like this, but these are some of the little tricks you can do when a student said 1 or 2 sentences, when you're working up close and personal with that student. So some of the ways that you can get these students to focus on just what they need. And all of this is leading to some shifts in your teaching. And just as a kind of recap, here are some of those shifts. And I mentioned this is from the first half and second half. I guess the bright money you spotted, it's on your handout. It's blue there. And again, this is not from me, okay? I stole this. I actually took a screen grab off a video from International House in London, and the link to the video is there in the links at the end. And this is their kind of summary. So, we want to shift the learning from material-centered, not just about coursebook, to making it more learning-centered. Okay, what's the learning we have to do for the individual students? Not learner-centered, learning-centered. Ritualized methodology. They talked about, when they're watching classes, people going through the motions of doing a class. Okay, so now we do the pre-reading, now we do the reading, now I always get every correct answer, and now I go on, and now maybe I do a role play, whatever, and it's just totally standard. The teacher's almost doing it without thinking. Instead, the teacher is trying to move through in terms of what they really think their students need, and as much as possible, working individually with the students. And if the students have it, the teacher's moving on faster. That's a key point here. It's not about always making everything take longer. There are some things you just don't need. And that's pretty. If you're following through every part of the course book, you're always going to trap yourself in having too much to do. So if you need more time, you've got to carefully spot what your students don't need or what you don't need. So here as well, to make this work, to give you the space to do this individual correction, this one amongst many, the teacher can't be like I am today. Okay, I'm doing a lot of chalk and talk. And this is where, again, you can use things like the flipped classroom, fits in nicely here. You can get some of the presentation happening outside the classroom. You know, your students could watch the slides or read a piece of homework first, prepare something, then come into class and do it. Now I know expecting all your students to do their homework before you do the next lesson, I know that doesn't always work. You know, I do live in the real world. So sometimes if their homework involves them watching a video or doing something a little bit more engaging, a little bit more interesting, it does motivate a little bit more. But in the class, everybody can't just be listening to the teacher. Because if you do that, you can really only correct one student at once and everybody else is doing nothing. So you need to put the focus back on the students, have them involved in tasks, in activities that are a little bit sustaining to do this. But when that's happening, you're not just, it's the next point down, you're not just a facilitator. You don't do this what we call abdicating facilitation. You don't start up a task and say, oh great, I'm teaching, look, because I did the introduction, I set up a task, and the students are talking. And I can go off and have coffee. That's not okay. You need to be in there catching where they're having problems, correcting if possible, and so on. So this facilitation isn't enough. You need to be close monitoring. So that is active interactive management. There's a very good link to a set of management strategies on the Underhill site that I gave you. We want a language upgrade. Things need to be fun all the way through. Right, so the tasks need to be silly and engaging and motivating. It's not like we will have fun extra at the end. That's an interesting challenge. We'll maybe talk more about fun in another session. The language work here, we need to get the students to do the language work, and the teacher needs to take control of it and use it and risk and get. They talk about swimming around in the language, getting your hands dirty. Right, like we were doing there with the wills and going tos and haves, and you've got to take risks and you've got to have your students take risks as well. You can't just expect every error correction is going to come up in my course book, where everything will be dealt with. You have to see what the students do and then deal with things as they happen and get students to notice that and work with that. So don't devolve it, don't pass it off, get stuck in. Do you praise or learn their attempts? I'm talking too much now. Do you praise or learn their attempts, yes or no?
Yes.
By this? No, you don't. Good job, I asked. Okay, don't praise or learn their attempts, that's too easy. Give precise feedback on what they've got right or wrong to help them know what they've got to upgrade, right? Maybe you're positive about them, but don't just simply say, awesome, well done, great, fantastic. You need to be giving them precise feedback, okay? Questions are not just for testing whether students have understood or not, like concept checks, but questions are also to get the students to think about why something might be wrong, to get them to actually explain their English. As the gentleman was saying here, you want the student to explain the right answers, and you also want them to be able to explain every answer. So we get that stimulation in there. The correct answer isn't the end of the story, because we need to make sure everybody's involved, okay? And that means simply that we can't accept the first answers we get, because we need to push and nudge every student. We need to make sure everybody's working with what we're doing, okay? Now, I'm almost done. I'm not going to keep you long, but I can sense the buses and trams and aeroplanes of Moscow sort of leaving and everybody sneaking out of the room. So I just want to say a couple of things to round up. I mean, this is a good summary, but I want you to look back at what things you might be able to change yourselves. At the end of here are some references. We've also been doing some classroom research. I'll show you some pictures of students working demand high in EF classrooms. Okay, with the teachers, you can spot the teachers. Ugly one's me there, someone in California here, someone in Manchester there, it's another Manchester one, over here is Bristol. And the teachers are drawing things out of the students. And we've done some research work where we've got a way of looking at our materials and seeing if the materials promote the opportunity for students to question their mistakes and get the students talking about language themselves. Because if you've got materials that encourage the students to talk to each other about language, and the students are responding in that way, then some of the pushing is already done, and the teacher can join in. So we have a little research work we've been doing on that. And any of you are very welcome to join in that. We can give you some something to use to test your materials as you use them in class and see if they are producing students demanding language questions of each other. So it's a very simple little tool that we have that you're very welcome to try out if you email me on that. Okay? And the final thing I want to say, all these links at the end, right at the bottom, the most important stuff we do, as well as what I'm doing here today with this massive group, we have a series of webinars. We have one every 2 weeks. These are delivered by me and my colleagues in Zurich and some of our people from our schools around the world. And we look at a different topic every 2 weeks, a little bit of methodology work, and there's a series of these starting this month. If you join 6 of those, like this session here, I know many people wanted to get their certificate, and I know you'll get your, because you stayed to the end, well done. But if you attend 6 of our online sessions, we will also send you a certificate for that. So it's another way to get a little bit more professional development. And we talk about a range of topics, and it's a live webinar, so you can join in, you can ask difficult questions, and you will be working with colleagues from around the world. So it's also an interesting little bit of networking. It's not just people from Moscow area. Okay? So thank you very much. I've said everything I need to say. Thank you for saying that.